Hello, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen from East Africa, and good morning, West Africa. We are honored this afternoon and this morning to be hosting Sait Matty Jaw, who is a political science lecturer and researcher at the University of The Gambia, focusing on Gambian politics. His areas of interest include constitutional development, diaspora politics, political participation, election management, local government and decentralization, peace building and conflict prevention, and corruption and natural resource management. Sait is, for the last 15 years, has worked as a social justice activist, especially on children and youth-related policies, on harmful traditional practices like female genital mutilation, and is currently the national coordinator for Safe Hands The Gambia. He has also extensively worked on security and governance issues, at one time serving as the national early warning systems manager for West African Network for Peace Building in the Gambia. He has also participated in various regional meetings on democracy and governance. Today we are going to have an interesting conversation where we are talking Gambia after YAHYA JAMMEH. We are asking, were the promises kept or it was a bad deal? And I would like to welcome Sait on site to be part of this conversation. Sait, you're welcome to Distinct Talks.
Thank you, Emmy, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a real honor having you. I know you're a very busy person, but we are honored that you've been able to have the time to join this conversation as we talk to the rest of the continent about the issues of democratization and the future of the continent. And I particularly was happy to have you because you're a political scientist, you're a researcher, but also you're an avid follower of the governance process across the continent. But I wanted to first put to context our conversation so that our viewers and those who are following us are able to appreciate the background of this conversation. We are talking about the Gambia. The Gambia got its independence in 1965, and the independence leader was Dawda Jawara, who was president for 29 years until he was overthrown through a bloodless military coup in 1994 by YAHYA Abdulaziz JAMMEH. And then until recently, in 2016, Adama Barrow won in an election where he beat YAHYA JAMMEH, a surprise result for the rest of the world and the continent, where JAMMEH at first accepted the result. A couple of hours later rescinded his position and felt like the election was not free and fair. But ECOWAS made some threats of military intervention, and I think JAMMEH then eventually accepted that he was going to leave power. In that election, YAHYA got 39% and Adama Barrow got 43% in a coalition of 7 opposition political parties that supported him into the presidency of the Gambia. Adama came with a lot of, inspired a lot of hope. And it seems like that hope is fading amongst the people of the Gambia. Having been united behind 7 political parties, Adama promised, these are some of the promises he made, to create jobs, to repeal bad laws, to create a level political playing ground. He promised to only be a transitional president, resigning after 3 years. Those 3 years have elapsed. Now voters are saying little progress has been made. In fact, some voters and citizens say corruption and inefficiency persists. The coalition already fell apart within months due to political infighting. 41.5% of Gambia's youth are unemployed, according to the Gambia Bureau of Statistics in 2018. The living conditions have not improved. The biggest budget expenditure is on defense, security, and foreign affairs. Education and health are the lowest priorities. Foreign debt is piling up, and international partners are becoming wary of the situation. But also interestingly, there's been a lot of applaud and praise for President Adama because of the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparations Commission, which is examining abuses of previous regimes, which has been welcomed widely by the people of Gambia. Now, interestingly, we have had recent protests in the capital, where we have the 3 years is enough movement, which is reminding the president that you promised us 3 years, you need to live. And recently, President Barrow announced a new political party that is going to be, the vehicle is going to use to bid for the presidency in 2021. And so he rescinded on his promises. And I just wanted to ask you, Sait, are you surprised? Are you surprised that President Barrow rescinded on his promise of being a transitional leader? Because this happens all the time. It has happened across many African countries, and I am surprised that people in Gambia are surprised.
Yeah, we are surprised because the kind of person that we felt Barrow was, because we were all part of the bandwagon, trying to remove JAMMEH through the electoral process, and so we had a mission, we had a vision, I had a vision for a new Gambia, but right now we all feel betrayed by President Barrow, because most of the things that you mentioned, some of those things outside the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparation Commission, the constitutional review process, which we are not even sure where it is going to lead to. We haven't seen seriously any serious changes that have taken shape in Gambia. Today, as we are discussing, with the dominant discourse today is about police brutality, about how the anti-crime unit is being used as a tool to suppress on young people. So there are a lot of conversations around what happened in the past, and still what Gambians were expecting and looking forward, a new Gambia different from JAMMEH past. We're just still seeing the same Gambia, but this time with Barrow.
And of course, I know that in the Gambia you have a pluralist system where a simple majority for president helps you to win. But I'm also very interested for purposes of the people that are viewing the show. In the Gambia, you use marbles to vote. You don't use ballot papers. Just explain to us how that works, and how good is that process?
Yeah, I think the size of the Gambia, and also the level of education, especially around the down of independence, end of colonialism, when multi-party elections were introduced. Because if you also follow historically, Gambia, like many other African countries, were ruled based on colonial protectorate. So it was only in the 1960s when the protectorate, was integrated into the whole nation, when they started voting. But then majority of the people that were in the protectorate were illiterate, and so the idea was to develop a voting electoral system that would be representative, would be acceptable, would be understood by everybody. So in 1962, we introduced the marble system, and so how the marble system works, we have small drums. And then in the drum, we have a small hole where you fit the marble in. And then within the marble, the barrel itself, so we have a bell. So whenever you dump your marble, and the bell will ring. So those that are around would know that you have voted. So for me, I am one of those that say our marble system is rig-proof, especially after you vote, because also, around when you're voting, you have all these different representative people from different political parties are represented. They have a list, just like in many other elections. And then so we have serial code. So to rig the election at that point is always very difficult, or if not impossible, because I don't think also people will allow that. So that is the unique system. But now the discussion is that they want to change that, and so we are yet to have a discussion. But for me, the question is why we want to change something that is working for everybody. And I think as we discuss in electoral reform, as we discuss in constitutional reform, these are issues, critical issues that we need to also put on the table.
No, that's very interesting. And I think I like the idea that when you throw in the marble, there's a bell that rings.
Yes,
so
yes.
You can't stop marbles, because we shall hear bells ringing all through.
Yeah.
But what about invalid? Do you have invalid marbles?
Yes, so we do have invalid, but then if you look at it over the years, this number of invalid voters are reducing. In some places, you even have 0 invalid votes, because people generally understand the system. So they just take the marble and then dump it inside. But then invalid happens when instead of putting the marble inside the small hole in the drum and placing it on the drum, so that's an invalid vote because you're just placing it on top of that. So but generally you in most elections you see very few invalid votes, very few invalid votes.
No, I mean, I think that of course it works for Gambia, which has population is not so big. I think the registered voters is about 900,000 in the last election. So that seems like a possible thing to do. But I want to take you back to the conversation on young people. Young people were a big part of the support for Adama and the support for a new dispensation. They came in large numbers to vote. They came in large numbers at the public rallies to be part of the conversation. But after the election, the Gambian Bureau of Statistics is saying 41.5% of young people don't have jobs. Adama promised these jobs. Where the young people should be changed.
Well, one of the conversations that I had with young people was that, okay, what we are trying to look for right now is regime change and a system change. And this was before the election. And one of the things that we should not expect that this current government should provide is jobs, because I did not see how they were going to provide jobs given the kind of political context, the political realities that also we confronted with at the time. So for me, the issue of job was more around secondary, because also for the regime, because nothing was working. The private sector also wasn't working. But what young people did at that time, because it is the young people that were trying to survive. It was the young people that were in the small scale businesses, whether it is in construction, whether it is in the film, photography, whatever business that you're looking at, it was young people that were trying to engage in that. But then the broader environment wasn't so conducive. So we also saw a lot of young people migrating and also dying. So for the past maybe 10 years, this growing awareness was within the Gambian youth, and also
Sait, are you still there? Sait Matty? Okay, I think Sait has a technical problem. We are going to hope that he's going to be able to get back to us. For this. Oh, you're welcome. Welcome back, Sait. Okay.
Hello?
Yes, please continue.
Yes, I'm hearing you. Like my network here is a little bit poor, so yes. So I'm saying
okay. Continue with the conversation.
Sustained and continuous mobilization by young people. Yes. So I said it has been young people have been part of the process from the onset. For the past 22 years, they've been engaged in building movements, in doing many other stuff. And so the promise was jobs. The promise was a new Gambia. But right now, young people are disappointed, because even right now, as we're speaking, there are conversations around the dismissal of the National Youth Council executive secretary, who young people really rally behind, because he has transformed and ensured that that institution has not been politicized as was in the past. But this current government do not like that, and so he has been dismissed. So young people are agitating against that, and so even the people that have been appointed as advisors around youth affairs are older generation, 65-year-olds. So young people are not also happy with those issues. So generally, like I said, young Gambians today feel like they've been betrayed by this current regime. Even though they have fought to ensure that this regime came into being, they've been neglected from the onset, and that's the reality.
And so, Sait, what does this mean? Because I know that President Adama promised that he was going to be a transitional president. He was going to be president for 3 years and then move forward to be able to create a new system. I also know that there have been some recent protests in Banjul There's also a new movement called the 3 years is enough movement that wants him to keep his promise of the 3 years. But I also know that some members of his government, his advisors have said that when the 3 years as part of the promise, he did not realize that the election mandate was for 5 years. And they're saying he's going to run his 5-year mandate and he's not going to run the 3-year mandate. I mean, we have this all over Africa where people come and pretend to be running a transitional government and then take advantage and consolidate themselves in those positions and then come back as candidates. I mean, so how are the youth dealing with this? I know that there's a big planned demonstration coming up just to push Adama to keep his word.
I mean, the 3 years Jodna movement came into being because these are also a group of young people, usually and mostly, felt betrayed by Barrow, because from the onset, all that he was saying was he was going to serve 3 years because this was the agenda. We all know that the constitution said 5 years, but the idea was to create a transitional system, to create a level playing field, because historically political parties refused to form coalition. They've, like, from 2001 when the election was changed to plural system, I mean simple majority, a lot of the discourse was to create opposition bloc to tackle JAMMEH, because that was the only solution. And so the promise then was, when a new government came, we'll have a transitional system, ensure that there are electoral reforms, there are law reforms, to ensure that we have a level playing field where all political parties can effectively, campaign. And the goal then was to end self-perpetuating rule. But what we are seeing now with this current government is that they want to self-perpetuate. Even as we're speaking, it has not been declared as a, as a campaign period, but we already see Barrow and his new political party, National People's Party. He did not only fail the 3 years, but he went on to also establish his own political party while being an incumbent, just like what YAHYA did with the APRC. So that's why people are saying it's like just 6 and 9. We don't know what is the difference. But then there's growing awareness, and the 3-year movement has also initiated a conversation around, around Barrow's, whether he has kept his promise and all that. So 2021 will be an interesting year in Gambian politics, because I think also we're going to have another transition again, because like I said, we've been betrayed.
Okay. But also I know that currently the country is running on the 1997 constitution that was set up under YAHYA JAMMEH. I know that there's a constitutional review process going on. How is that? Because one of the Adama's promises was to bring back the 2-term limit. Do people trust, now that he has not kept his promise of the 3 years, do they trust that he's actually going to put the 2-term limit there, or he might want to perpetuate himself even longer in power, just like all the other the former 2 presidents?
Yeah, so but the good thing for us with the constitutional review process is that because there have been a lot of the consultative process, the nature of the process itself, provided opportunity for a lot of Gambians to participate in the process. So in the discussion is that people want term limits. Even a recent survey by the International Republican Institute also shows that majority of Gambians supports term limits, 2-term limits, and initially it has been there. And so people are aware that it is the self-perpetuating rule of both Sadauda Keraba Jawara and YAHYA JAMMEH that has put us into this situation where we are. People want leadership change. People, want the democratic process to be transparent and accountable in that process, and that requires changing leadership periodically. So majority of Gambians support that. And so, but the politics around the constitution is also very interesting, because we are beginning to see a lot of partisanship growing within the Gambian National Assembly, and so already the draft constitution have been gazetted, and one of the newspapers is also serializing what the cabinet think about the new constitution, what their positions are. But when you look at that and what we actually wanted based on the MOU that we came up with in the coalition 2016, it's totally different from the ideas that we want for a new Gambia. It is talking about the executive maybe controlling the traditional authorities, and here for political purposes, we know when you control traditional authorities, basically you control the people at the local level. So those are issues that we're trying to run away from, trying to democratize those institutions. But Barrow wants to move us there. And he's also, the other debate is also about whether his current term would serve as part of the 2 term if we are introducing a new constitution, and so overwhelming majority of Gambians wanted that. And so the constitution, so the current draft constitution, or the constitution, the gazetted bill, has ensured that a clause is there stating that this current term of President Barrow is part of the of his 2 terms. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to ensure that the change that we fought for in 2016 will not be just taken by somebody trying to enrich himself or self-perpetuate. I think Gambia of today and Gambia of yesterday is a different Gambia, and so we're all ready for that.
And I think as we begin to go towards the wrap up of this conversation, Sait, I just wanted to just for the purposes of our viewers.
Hello?
JAMMEH had been in charge of the army, the intelligence apparatus, and these systems were heavily funded.
Yeah.
Where were these processes when he lost the election? Everyone was surprised that with the control of the army and the security apparatus, he would perpetuate himself in power even when he loses an election. What happened to the army? What was their change of mind? What was the tipping point that forced them not to defend YAHYA JAMMEH as the president?
Well, the army has always been, for me personally, I'm very different with many Gambians to that. I feel our army has been professional enough, and that they have been an institution. Of course, they have made some mistakes, but then JAMMEH was their commander-in-chief, not trying to create excuses for them. But then that became, for me, my trust in the army came when the army commander said, this is a political problem and it must be dealt politically. We are not going to fight. And everybody knew that's what they said, and that's what they did. They did not fight. So what they did was, during the impasse, they went around, securing banks, securing strategic locations, just because also to try to avoid some other issues. But when they were called to go back to the barracks, they went. And so now the military, what they are looking for is that professionalism. Is they want to be under civilian control. They want to be directed by a civilian authority, because also it is in their interest. Because the general feeling in Gambia is that we want democracy, and so military, being part of the national institution, also wants that, because there are young officers, there are people that want to grow, they want to move away from the past, and so within the security institution, we're having that problem of the old guards versus those that want to the new ones with the visions that want to change. But for me, the important aspect that we need to focus on is what the civil authority is doing, especially President Barrow. And one time, some time ago, he was saying that he had the military, the police, the NIA, and including even the ECOMIC, the West African military contingent that is currently in here. So for me, my worry is not on what the military will do, because we are there. Some of my students are from the military, and for them, they know the message. The message is that you cannot destabilize this country, and they know that clearly. But then for us, the worrying part is the person that is controlling the military. And here for me is President Barrow, and him coming out openly and talking about having the military, including ECOMIC, and talking about that even the role of ECOMIC in 2021 has not been defined as part of the conversation. And so ECOMIC, what is their mandate? Why are they here? We know, but then things have changed, and we feel, part of the conversation should include what ECOMIC will be doing here in 2021, especially when the elections are coming. So I think, we are overwhelmed with a lot of issues, and I did not know that transitions are this hard. I think we need to be learning more from other countries, because we've seen a lot of countries that are yearning for democracy and all that. But what comes after is always the hard part, and it requires dialogue, it requires understanding. And for us, so far, we have not been doing that. And I think that should be the direction now.
And in terms of the transition, are you getting any help from ECOWAS, the neighboring countries, or in the international community? Are you getting any kind of help in these conversations about the transition?
Oh yeah, there's a amazing good international goodwill, and that's why we said there's a missed opportunity, because we have a government that is more focused on trying to entrench themselves instead of thinking about the bigger picture. But at some point, even the EU organized a donor meeting in Brussels where a lot of money was pledged, but we don't know how much of that money even came back. But in terms of the transitional justice processes, whether it is a constitutional review, whether it is the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparation Commission, or even the security sector reform, we have in international advisory groups that are here. We have in support, financial support, and also technical support from the United Nations, from the International Republican Institute, NDI. There are a lot of international goodwill coming in. But then again, we also have very weak infrastructure in terms of civil society engagement is also very weak, in terms of also government understanding how to engage civil society. Both the supply and demand side is also very weak. So part of the strategy is also to see how do we uplift the skills to ensure that it is in line with the kind of support that we are also having. So the discussion also needs to move not only from the support that we get it, but also about local ownership and ensuring that we sustain these reform processes. But so far, the level of local ownership, or even the level of awareness when it comes to some of these transitional issues is still problematic. And I think with more civil society engagement, we'll be able to enlighten the public.
Sait, maybe this is the part where I know you have a big interest in the diaspora, especially the Gambians in the diaspora. Maybe this is a very critical part they will be playing in terms of coming down to bring their expertise to help during this transitional process. Are you people inspiring some of them to come home to help with this process?
Yeah, the diaspora has, and one thing that for me, I am not interested in romanticizing history. I want to state it as it is. But one of the things that we have not acknowledged greatly in our discourse, especially in our transitional discourse, is the critical role that the Gambia diaspora has played. When I was doing my master's thesis, I wrote on their struggle to restore democracy in the Gambia from 1994 all the way down. And so they were a group that, especially the activists, were a group that sustained this project of demystifying JAMMEH, of ensuring that people are aware, and having diaspora media houses engaging in discussions, because the public space under JAMMEH was not there. So people started moving online and then having that conversation. But post JAMMEH, the diaspora now is seen as a critical mass, is seen as a problematic by the new government, and we are discussing about enfranchising them. Locally, the new electoral roadmap that has been issued by the Independent Electoral Commission, they talk about registration of diaspora voters. But then one of the challenges for the longest has been technical and financial. So we're not sure whether they have already acquired those finances or they're expecting. But for me, I am skeptical that the diaspora will still be enfranchised. But for me, I also think the diaspora decided to relax after the change. They felt, okay, we got a regime change, so now it's okay, things will get better, and so we're going to go back home, do business. And so some of their organizational structures that they had, it died down naturally, and because they felt it was already done, and some of them joined political parties and all that. But the issues around franchise, for me, I don't only want the diaspora to be allowed to vote, but I also want them to be represented. But in order to have that in the National Assembly, in order to have that, they need to be organized. They need to be organized. They need to understand that they are critical mass, and then they have to be part of the process. Because now, we are receiving more money from the diaspora than we are receiving from aid agencies. So, you can imagine the role and the contribution that they are doing. So they don't only need the voice, but they need to be on the decision-making table.
Said, just to, I know you, I know so before JAMMEH's fall, I know you had a couple of friends of yours that were in exile and everything, but I just wanted to understand, what role did the diaspora play in this entire process of making sure JAMMEH leaves power? I mean, what kind of role did they, was it critical? Were they a kind of force to reckon with to the extent that they influenced part of the processes that happened back home? Because, across the African continent, we have a lot of diaspora communities trying to agitate, trying to run these campaigns to make sure there's regime change. Do they have a real impact in terms of making things happen back home?
Yes, the diaspora was the powerhouse behind the movement, if I can say that, because in terms of they provided the platform, they provided the financial support to the opposition political parties. They raised, at one point I was watching Fatu Kamara. She was raising funds for the coalition. Within 2 hours, she raised about $10,000 US. And then you had a lot of other, the Gambia Democracy Fund, they were raising money. People were contributing because everybody agreed that we needed change. But then how that change was supposed to come, people also agreed that it was supposed to be through a coalition. So when the coalition came, everybody, people in the diaspora, if you follow the GoFundMe accounts, you see people supporting. And there were also people locally here that were also supporting money. And the other interesting thing is also Facebook, the internet also has been able, in particular, to connect us, the local activists that were on the ground, and us, mostly the diaspora activists. So we through a Facebook program, a group that we had before around the 2010 was called Balafon, where I got to meet a lot of people that I know in the diaspora today through that Balafon, where we had series of exchanges, and so that continued. Even though there are disagreements that still exist between those here and those that are in the diaspora. Some of us feel like they want to they have this savior mentality that they want to control and and direct us according to the way they want to know without factoring the reality. But they also have a different understanding that we are slow, we don't want change. So those are the conversations that we need to have, and I think we used to have them. But for me, I think the diaspora helped demystify JAMMEH, and also they provided majority of the financial resources that were used by the opposition. And so in a new Gambia, for people that did not only sustain the struggle for the past 22 years, but also ensure that from 2003 through Safe the Gambia Democracy Project, through coalitions, to different networks, they've been exposing the human rights violations in the country. Today, what the TRRC is discussing, we already know, because the diaspora were able to explore most of those issues, especially freedom of newspaper. So I think the role of the diaspora in when it comes to agitation must know what they really want, and also try to think about the broader picture and not just on regime change. Because sometimes if you for us also, it got to that point because many people in the struggle, especially in the diaspora, took it personal, because some of them were affected by the regime, like were illegally detained and all those things. And this we are powerful, maybe journalists, human rights activists already. So when they got to the diaspora, they just amplify, because they had a safer location. So they just amplify, and then thanks to the internet, they were communicating directly to the locals here.
And so say I just wanted to focus a couple of lessons that you raise up, especially when it comes to agitation for change, that people must have a goal. What happens after this? I think for a lot of processes in the continent, we've had people agitating for change, and when change happens, they are not prepared on how to run the country. They are not prepared on what happens after that. And I think so. What lessons, apart from just seeing how difficult it is to deal with transition, what lesson do you pick out that you think the rest of Africa can learn from the Gambia in terms of preparation for change, agitation for change, and then planning for the bigger picture in the future?
Mm-hmm. I think for us, the biggest lesson is that, like, if one wants change, one needs to be organized and one needs to be united in purpose. And I think the struggle against JAMMEH was, especially from the diaspora perspective, and their relationship and the leverage that they have on the local political parties, were basically ways and measures through which they were able to, to contribute into the broader discussions. And so for us, one of the things that I feel that I think I just want to briefly highlight it is the fact that we did not have effective transition. JAMMEH left, Barrow was in Dakar, and so we did not have any handing over, proper handing over from from the JAMMEH regime to the Barrow regime, because of the nature of the transition, of the nature of the impasse. Because one of the mistakes also that we did, I think, from the onset, and I'm not saying that this is a contributing factor, but I think it might be a contributing factor, because immediately after the change, we hear people, especially part of the coalition, talking about vengeance, talking about arresting, prosecution, JAMMEH. So at least that created that tension, contributed in creating that tension, especially when JAMMEH decided to say, okay, now the IAC made a mistake, so I'm going to capitalize on that, to also protect myself. But so for us, the lesson must be, a transition cannot just happen just because there are victors and losers. Transition must happen because people agree and want to move on, because they understand at the end of the day, it is what is important is the country, and what is important is the future of that country. And so for us, the what we haven't done, and we have continued to agitate for that, is to have a national dialogue. We've instituted a lot of transitional justice measures like the TRRC, but we did not have a national political conversation where we bring all political parties, including the APRC party, the JAMMEH's former political party, because they are critical mass. And for me, I don't agree with some people are agitating that they need to be banned, but I said, why must we do that? So let the people decide what they want, especially when political parties are legally registered. So we are yet to have conversations, and I think the first thing that any transition must do is to have a conversation about the future of that country. What is the role of the opposition? What is the role of the winners? And it doesn't mean that issues of human rights violation that have been handled before cannot be addressed. In the beginning, I was so optimistic, and my call was to have all Gambians, especially those that work with the former regime, to continue to work for the country. Because at the end of the day, we need to learn from the mistakes of the past, but more so trying to say this is not what we want, and then we're gonna move it that way. So for me, initially in 2017, if you look at my article on the Guardian, it was talking about that even if the problems that we were confronted were done by people because of the kind of regime that we had, I felt that in a democracy, these people might have done something different because already they understand the institution and they'll be able to that. But today, if you ask me that, I'll say no, because some of these people, they'll just still continue want to do that same, and that's the problem that we're having with our institution. And so for me, I would recommend that people that have not contributed in ensuring that there's a new page, people that have contributed badly in the past, they need to be vetted, they need to be put aside, and people that have integrity, that are seen not to be tainted to take the lead. Because a country cannot just rely on few people, few individuals. It needs to continue to have discussions. It needs to continue to open up the public space, because at the end of the day, if we don't express ourselves, talk about our feelings, how would the government know what we want, and how do we know what the government is thinking about? So for me, this is my struggle now, and my struggle in Gambia right now. We've established a new center, a Center for Research and Policy Development, where we'll be trying to document some of these challenges, but most importantly, engage the community through dialogue and also through research. evidence-based, because that's also has been missing in our transition. We just, because of the small size of the country, we have a very small allied population. We know each other almost every time. We grew up together. It's a small population. So sometimes, these things are natural. But for us, what we are trying to do is to ensure that we counter narratives, we counter false narratives, we also counter narratives that are not geared towards ensuring that the future of this country is protected. And I think every transition needs to counter narratives and ensure that the history of a country is recorded accordingly, and that people are part and parcel of that process. It cannot only be the political class that that decide the future of a country. It must be everybody. And here, this is where I think young people are also very important. And in the case of Gambia, we see, just yesterday I was having a discussion with somebody, and I was saying, okay, we had 22 years of dictatorship, but under that 22 years, people like me, people like many others, young activists, grew up within that environment. And so people do not see, while the state was very violent, young people, we were allowed to grow, and things that we were doing was not actually monitored. But we grew up and said we don't want this system, so we want to change that system. And we still have that mentality in Gambia right now. And I think young people all over Africa must have that the future of the continent, the future of their country is in their hands. And therefore, if they want to have better healthcare, if they want to have jobs, if they want to have a good living, they need to be part of the process. They need to discourse, even let them be in their bedroom, but let them, say something that is not right, say something that is not in the interest of the future, because we need to start protecting the future. And whether it is the environment, our resources, everything, we need to start protecting. And I think that's the direction. And I'm happy that us young people around the continent, we are having this conversation, and it must continue. It must continue, because at the end of the day, we are not the future leaders, we are the leaders. So whether we are ready or not, it is coming.
Yes, Sait, I'm also happy that you're setting up the Center for Policy Research Development. I'm advising that you call it the Center for Policy Research and Leadership Development, because part of our problem is the incubation space. We don't have any incubation space that is deliberate to produce leaders. A lot of the leaders are circumstantial. When there's a pain, then you get the opportunity to become a minister, and then you're not even prepared, you don't know how to deal with it. So I'm advising that you add the word leadership onto the center, so that you become an incubation hub for that space. But I also like the idea you say that if people are agitating for change, they must organize. They must have unity of purpose, but they need to plan for the bigger picture. They need to plan for the future. When you eventually take power, what do you do about it? But also very critically, as we wrap this conversation up, the rest of the continent, to young people, to political parties, to African leaders, what are your thoughts? What are your words of advice on how do we get the Africa that we want? We have Vision 2063. We have all these plans for the future. How do we prepare for that kind of future? With the kind of leadership we have, what do political parties need to do? What do young people need to do in preparation for that kind of Africa that we are all agitating for?
Thank you. I think for me, I have a political historical approach, perhaps, if that's the better term to look at that. I feel most of our generation, especially us, and I have this conversation with older Gambians a lot. I don't feel that there's been that connection with us and the older generation. The struggle of the past is no longer our struggle, and we do not even learn, from those struggles. And I take pre-colonial Africa, for instance, and how Africans were resisting against domination. And today we're talking about sovereign, independent countries, but yet we act as if we are under slavery in terms of the number of debts that we are getting and how we are getting those debts, and we are not investing in the future of the continent. And for me, my approach and my advice would be, one, we need to understand the struggle, how far we have come, and I think that's where historians are needed. especially political historians, to continue, because sometimes, you know, if you like here within our culture, within our tradition, we have the griots, and their role, for many thought that it was just to entertain the kings, but the role was to also advise and in some cases even insult the king, to ensure that it is in line with the dictates of the society, because your job is to protect your king, and protecting your king involves making sure that he is happy, and then making sure that he is also protected against himself in particular. So young people, we need to protect ourselves from ourselves, and the only way we need to do that is to continue having conversation. For me, people will keep saying, well, I don't know how you have time to speak to people that I cannot even stand. I said, you know, if I don't talk to you, how would you understand me? If I don't, if you're not making sense, I'll try to understand what you're saying. But here we don't try to, and I think this is the problem with us. We use our emotions mostly, and without thinking straight, logically, and thinking about, okay, if I do this action, what will happen tomorrow? And I think for us, the way we need to start thinking, especially talking about Agenda 2063, is start thinking about the future. What will happen to our children 100 years? Because if we cannot provide the environment, if we cannot ensure that there is no repetition of slavery and this slavery among ourselves, I don't think the future of the continent will be that bright. So at the end of the day, the young people must get the education, must understand where they're coming from, must understand where also they want to go, and must also try to compromise, because we always compete, but compromise is one element of politics that I don't think many African politicians or political leaders even do understand. It is either their way or the highway, and these things need to change. Politics is two things: it's compromise and competition. The competition talks about the electoral competition, but after that, all you need to do is negotiate, and people need to negotiate and understand. Today you win here, tomorrow you lose. That's how the world should work. But in whatever we're doing, we also need to ensure that the future and the safety of the country is, and the continent. And for me, I think that's what we need to do. And let's be organized, and let's network and discourse.
I mean, Sait, I totally agree with you that compromise is very critical. People need to have a conversation about the future. Those who are agitating for change must be organized so that they don't destroy the little that has been created within the spaces that they want power in. But also very importantly that the youth are the leaders of today. So they must use their numbers responsibly. They must use those numbers in a way that adds value to the democratization process. And it was very nice having you. Sait, I am hoping I can bring you back when the new constitution eventually comes, because I am looking forward to see the content. I want to see what the term limits. I want to see what kind of powers President Adama Barrow gives himself in terms of the constitutional review process. But from me and the team, we are very honored to have you here, and we hope that we are going to get back to you and bring you back another time to have more conversations about the democratization process in Africa. Thank you very much, Sait Matty Jaw.
Thank you, Emmy, and let the conversation continue. And you know, I don't need to say anything. You know what you need to do, and we have to do what we have to do for this continent. Thank you.
And keep up the good job you're doing, Matty, and I'll keep following up on you.
You too.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, my brother. Yeah.
Okay. That was Sait from the Gambia. Interesting points that he has raised there. That if you're agitating for change, you must organize and there must be purpose. He also puts a lot of responsibility on the people in the diaspora, because a lot of you are based in spaces where you're not censored, where you have all these platforms that can be very helpful for you to be able to communicate and educate people on what is going on in your respective countries. Use those spaces wisely. He has also talked about the Gambian diaspora that was very critical in making a contribution towards the processes of change. But also that right now, the Gambian diaspora is contributing more money to the country than foreign aid, which is a very critical thing, an appreciation for the Zambian diaspora. But also I wanted to, as I close the session, I just wanted to tell you that earlier on I had a conversation with Matty, where I was telling him that it's very interesting that the Gambia got independence in 1965. In 1965, YAHYA Abdulaziz JAMMEH, the second president of Zambia, was also born in 1965, but also very interestingly, Adama Barrow, the new and current president of Zambia, was also born in 1965. 65 seems to be a recurrent number in the history of the Gambia. This session, again, was powered by the Christian Democratic International Center. That is a party foundation based in Stockholm, running programs in Eastern Europe, Latin America, and Eastern Africa. We are very honored for all of you that were able to have the time to be part of this conversation. And we thank you all very much, those who have sent in contributions and questions. And we hope that you keep online every time we have these conversations. It has been an honor. My name is Emmy Otim, and thank you very much for being part of the show. We'll see you next time again when we have the next guests to have another topical conversation about the African continent, but also issues that are cross-cutting and are helpful for all of us across the continent. Thank you all very much, and I would like to wish you a very splendid afternoon.